Okay, good morning, guys. It is Friday, and we are doing chapter 12 and 13. Okay, so I found a nice little bridge by the river here in Portolo, Italy, and I set up quiet. It's nice. I'm going to read here while my family goes shopping somewhere else. I don't shop that much, so it's no big deal. Okay, a river inside a building, chapter 12. Mucius had not separated from the others because he was in a hurry to get home. He had not even run away when they had. He stayed with Lucos, for he had made an astonishing discovery. After handing the chain to Julius, he had gone to the rear of the group, standing there more or less inconspicuous. He had taken the opportunity to look around the place. He was curious to find out how Lucos had made the iron-bound door open without himself leaving the vaulted room. Close to the floor along the wall, Mucius discovered several cords. Aha, he thought, that's the trick. Then his eyes fell on a wooden cloak lying half hidden behind a pillar near the fireplace. He was startled, for the cloak seemed familiar to him. While Julius was talking, he stole over to it, lifted it, and examined it closely. Sure enough, it was Rufus's cloak. Okay, might be the biggest clue of all. Rufus's cloak inside Lucos's house. Okay, this is weird. Why was it there? On the left shoulder was the neatly mended tear which Mucius had seen before. Here was clear proof that Rufus must have visited Lucos, but why? And why had he left his cloak behind? Puzzling over this, he paid no attention to the way the interview was going. Then suddenly he heard Lucos shout and saw his friends fleeing wildly. He hesitated for a moment, and that was his mistake. For by the time he began running after them, he was several yards behind. He raced into the corridor and found the inner door with the secret mechanism already shut. The others must have slammed it as they rushed out. He shook it, pounded his fists against it, but his friends did not hear. This was a pretty mess. He was caught like a mouse in a trap. It was so dark that he could not even see the walls of the passageway. The only light was the greenish sheen from the mask behind the pane of yellow glass. He looked at his hands and saw that they were shaking, and found to his surprise that he still was clutching Rufus's cloak. He was scared. His heart was pounding so loud he thought he could hear it. Ridiculous, he told himself. He won't do anything to me. But he was afraid of Lucos. Should he ask the soothsayer to let him out? He tiptoed back to the curtain and peered through it. Lucos was going around with a basket, picking up something. He moved in a peculiarly awkward fashion, and every step he took sounded as though he were pounding a block of wood against the floor. Stooping seemed hard for him, too, for he groaned aloud each time he bent his back. With a shudder, Mucius saw that the floor of the room was crawling with snakes. He backed into the corridor. As he groped along the walls, he felt a ladder under his hands. Quickly, he put on Rufus's cloak and lifted his foot to the lowest rung. A rung is a step on a ladder. That's the proper name for that. It was a long climb before his head bumped against something hard. He felt what was above him and realized that it was a ceiling trapdoor. When he braced himself against the ladder and pushed it open, upward, drops of rain pelted into his face. It was thundering and lightning. But this did not drive him back. He swung up onto the roof, quickly closed the trap door, and sat down upon it. Then he sighed with relief. He was out of that dreadful place. For a while, he sat there feeling quite pleased with himself, but gradually he began to be uncomfortable. He could not very well sit out here on the roof all night long in the pouring rain, with the lightning flashing all around him. Maybe I can jump off, he thought. Luckily, the roof did not have a sharp pitch. He crawled on his hands and knees to the edge and waited for a flash of lightning. Then he looked down and with a shudder started back. The building was far too high for him to venture a jump. He would break every bone in his body. Now he crawled along the edge of the roof, hoping to find a rain gutter on which he might shinny down. But this hope failed. There were no gutters. He made himself as small as he could, hunched up against the driving rain, and stared despairingly into the darkness. But suddenly, he sat bolt upright. By the latest lightning flash, he had caught a glimpse of the flat roof of another house, almost within reach. The distance between the two roofs was hardly longer than the length of his arm. Immediately, he crawled down to the edge and prepared to jump. At the next lightning flash, he leaped, fell forward on his face, but he was safe. He would certainly find another trapdoor on this roof, and he made up his mind to rouse the people who lived in this house and ask them to let him out. They would be strangers, but they certainly could not be as bad as Lukos. But how could he account for the fact that he was stranded on their roof? I'll simply tell them the truth, he decided. Cautiously, he crawled forward. But suddenly his hands reached out into empty space. He lost his balance and fell headfirst into space. It's all over, was his last thought. The fall will kill me. Then he dropped with a loud splash into water and sank like a stone. Mucius was a good swimmer, and with a few vigorous strokes, he brought himself quickly to the surface. It was pitch dark. He could see nothing at all. Water had got into his nose, and his head rang as though 1,000 pins were sticking into his brain. Rufus's cloak felt as heavy as iron on his back, and he had to keep treading water vigorously to stay on the surface. He had not the faintest idea where he could be. He must have fallen into a river, for he could feel a strong current under his feet. But how is that possible? The Tiber was at least half a mile away from here, and there was no other river near. Perhaps I am dead, he thought in a sudden terror. Perhaps I am swimming in the river Styx, which leads to Hades. But that was really too fantastic. The dead were supposed to wait nicely on the shore until Chiron took them across the Styx in his ferry. Besides, you didn't feel sick to your stomach when you were dead. And he certainly was feeling bad from all the water he had swallowed. Suddenly he realized that it was no longer raining, although it had just been pouring cats and dogs, and that the wind had stopped completely also. But he still heard the rain beating down high above his head. He gazed upward, and for a second, by a flash of lightning, caught sight of the sky framed in a square opening. No doubt about it. There was a roof above him with a skylight through which he must have fallen. He was inside the house next door. But then, how could there be a river inside a house? How strange. Growing tired of treading water, he let the current carry him along, and in a short time came up against a smooth wall. It felt like marble. Then he felt ground underfoot and realized with delight that the depth of the water was rapidly dropping. Soon it reached only his waist, and before long was gurgling harmlessly around his ankles. He waded along the wall, stumbled upon a flight of stone stairs, climbed up, and sat down exhausted on the top step. He felt altogether done in, and so weary that he could not frame a single clear thought. If only he could figure out where he was. He cursed the darkness because he could not see. He did not dare move from this place for fear of falling again. But suddenly he burst into laughter. In a flash, he had realized where he was. He had fallen into the baths of Diana, right into the swimming pool. What a joke. He knew these baths very well. They were an elegant place of recreation for rich patricians, and he had been here many times with his father. He had never known that the building was located directly back of Lukos's house. How often he had happily swum in this very pool into which he had just fallen so unexpectedly. At this point, he realized what an enormous luck he had had. The water of the baths was drained out every night. That was the reason for the powerful current. If he had tumbled in here only a little later, he would have broken his neck on the marble floor of the pool. He jumped to his feet and groped around until he found the front entrance. but the doors were firmly locked, and there was no other exit that he knew of. Here he was, locked in for the second time, and there was no help for it. He would have to wait all night until he was let out. He was soaking wet too, but at least he was not sitting on a roof in the rain. He found a marble bench, folded Rufus's cloak into a pillow, stretched out, and fell asleep at once. Okay. Chapter 13, the baths of Diana. And who's Diana? Do you remember in the Greek word or the Greek name? The Greek name for Diana was Demeter, and Demeter was famous for bathing in nature. Okay, and then we read a myth about that once before. Okay, so the baths of Diana. Next morning, he was rudely awakened. A brawny Arab was stooping over him, shaking him roughly by the shoulder. "This time I've caught you, you scamp," he railed. "This is the second time you've sneaked in here at night. Get up, you're going straight to the police." Mucius started up, stammering. What's the matter? Where am I? Who are you?" "I am the superintendent," the Arab said. "How did you get in here?" "I fell through by accident," Mucius said, pointing to the skylight above, high above, overhead, through which a bit of morning sky could be seen. "You're lying," the superintendent grunted. "You jumped in here night before last too. Yesterday morning you got away from me, but you won't be so lucky today." "I'm not lying," Mucius cried out. I did fall in last night and never before." "Oh, you deny it? What's your name?" "Mucius Marius Domitius," Mucius said proudly. "Ha!" the superintendent exclaimed with righteous wrath. "Then you are the one." And he thrust a bronze lantern under Mucius's nose. "So here's your lantern, or here's your name right here, Mucius Marius Domitius. This is your lantern. That proves it. Lying won't do you any good." Mucius was speechless. It actually was his lantern, the very one Rufus had taken by mistake. The superintendent grinned triumphantly. "I found the lantern yesterday morning on the floor of the pool. You're a liar and deserve a good thrashing." But Mucius was paying no attention, for a stirring thought had occurred to him. Could Rufus also have been in the baths of Diana yesterday? "What was the boy like? The one you found here yesterday?" he asked quickly. The superintendent was startled. "What's that? What was he like? Like you, of course." "That couldn't be," Mucius said. "He can't have looked like me because I wasn't here." The superintendent's bad temper returned. "So here we go again. Of all the barefaced, listen, you little scamp, you have some way of getting in and bathing without paying the entrance fee. For that kind of trick, you'll go to prison." This frightened Mucius. Prison was the last place he wanted to go. "I didn't intend to sneak in," he said. "I'll pay. What's the fee?" 10 sesterces. Children, half price," the superintendent said. "I'll bring you the money today," Mucius said. "No, wait, maybe I have it with me." He hastily rolled up his toga, reached into the pocket of his tunic, and found to his relief that he had not lost the handkerchief with the money. He untied the knot, picked out a silver coin worth 20 sesterces, and gave it to the superintendent. "But I have no change," the superintendent said, his eyes riveted on the money in the handkerchief. "No change required," Mucius said generously. The superintendent hesitated. "Where did you get all that money?" he asked suspiciously. "It's my pocket money," Mucius boldly claimed. He did not feel like telling the complicated story of how he happened to have the money with him. "Your father must be awfully rich to be able to give you so much pocket money," the superintendent said slowly. "My father is Marius Domitius, the tribune," Mucius said. The superintendent's eyes widened in disbelief. "What's that?" he exclaimed. "His Excellency Domitius? You mean it?" Mucius gave a superior smile and pointed to the lantern. "There it is," he said, "Marius Domitius. You just read it to me." The superintendent's manner changed abruptly. He bowed low, stammering, "Excuse my words. I beg your pardon for them. Please don't report this little incident to your father." I did not realize I let my temper run away with me. After all, I am in charge here and have to see that the rules are observed. We can't just have anybody sneaking in and using the baths without paying. Besides, it's dangerous. I drain the water out of the pool every night. If boys get into the habit of sneaking in via the roof, one of them, sooner or later, is going to jump into the empty pool and break his bones. And then, won't I be in trouble? You were very lucky, young sir, that there was still enough water in the basin. Shall I dry your clothes? You can't go home in that state. No time for that, Mucius said, suddenly realizing that he had not been home all night. How late is it anyway? The sun has just about risen. I must hurry, Mucius said, and started at a trot for the entrance. Almost immediately, however, he slowed down to a stop. Tell me about the boy who was here last night, he asked. When I opened the doors yesterday morning, the superintendent said, a boy dashed out of the building, almost knocking me down as he went by. It happened so quickly that I only caught a glimpse of him from the back. I couldn't catch him either. He shot off like a barbarian. He must have come in by way of the roof the night before. That is the only way he could have got in. Because I make sure the place is empty before I lock up every night, and this is the only entrance. When I found you on the bench this morning, I naturally thought you were the same fellow. But if you say you're not, you're not, he added in hasty apology. You'd better take your money back. Never mind about that, Mucius called and trotted off. Very kind of you, young sir, the superintendent called after him. Mucius ran the short distance to Broad Street, crossed, and made a detour around the Forum. He did not want to be seen by people in his present condition. His clothes were wet and filthy, and his hair an uncombed shock. But suddenly he stopped dead, as though struck by a bolt from the blue. Heavenly gods, he murmured to himself. Rufus is innocent. For it had suddenly occurred to him that Rufus could not possibly have written Caius as a dumbbell on the temple wall. Rufus had been locked up all night long in the baths of Diana. And remember, when they went to his house, he had those wet clothes under his bed, an empty money box and wet clothes under his bed. And he swore up and down he did not write that. Caius' dumbbell on the wall. All right, so anyway, I'm going to move on and see if I can find my family as they're shopping around, I don't know, that way, maybe that way, maybe that way. I'm not sure which way they went. But I want you guys to have a wonderful day, a wonderful weekend. I'll see you on Monday. I think on Monday, it's going to be kind of fun. We're going to Venice, Italy. Now, I know that's not where the story takes place, but still, it's kind of fun to be in Venice, you know, with all the waterways and the gondolas, gondoliers, the little boats. Anyway, see you then. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.